What if I told you that the biggest transformation a woman will ever experience doesn't come from changing her appearance, her status, or her lifestyle, but from something far deeper, sitting in a room, speaking her truth, and allowing therapy to unlock a version of herself she didn't even know existed? And today we're diving into exactly how those conversations turn ordinary women into unstoppable forces. So make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because this breakdown will open your eyes to how emotional healing becomes the ultimate engine of confidence, strength, and self-mastery that pushes a woman into a league of her own. 1. Emotional honesty as a catalyst. Therapy forces a level of emotional honesty most people never reach on their own, giving women the ability to finally confront feelings they've suppressed for years. She begins recognizing her patterns with more clarity. She sees how her upbringing shaped her reactions. She starts understanding the roots of her pain instead of just the symptoms. She learns to observe emotions rather than drown in them. She stops lying to herself about what hurts. She becomes aware of her coping mechanisms. She starts breaking cycles that once controlled her. She speaks truths she never admitted out loud. She becomes braver with her vulnerability. She stops fearing her own emotions. She understands herself with more depth. She stops dismissing her needs. She expresses herself more openly. She becomes grounded in her internal reality. She stops wearing emotional masks. She grows more self-aware each session, and this emotional honesty becomes the spark of her transformation. 2. Healing old wounds creates new strength. Therapy helps women heal old emotional wounds that once shaped their identity, giving them the strength to move forward without the weight of past trauma holding them back. She learns to detach from emotional burdens that no longer define her. She starts processing memories she once avoided. She no longer lets past relationships control her present. She recognizes patterns she inherited from her family. She becomes aware of how old hurt shaped her behavior. She begins releasing resentment that drained her energy. She forgives herself for mistakes she didn't understand at the time. She stops carrying guilt that isn't hers. She becomes more compassionate toward her younger self. She rebuilds trust in her own judgment. She stops feeling trapped by what happened to her. She sees her past with more clarity and less fear. She becomes stronger because the pain loses its power. She starts defining her life by growth instead of trauma. She becomes emotionally lighter. She gains a sense of internal freedom, and this healing becomes a foundation for her future strength. 3. Boundaries become unshakable. Therapy teaches women how to set boundaries that protect their energy, their time, and their emotional well-being without guilt or hesitation. She starts recognizing where she's been exploited. She stops people-pleasing as a survival tactic. She understands the difference between kindness and self-sacrifice. She becomes comfortable saying no without over-explaining. She stops tolerating disrespect. She notices when her comfort is being violated. She learns to enforce limits consistently. She becomes less reactive and more intentional. She stops giving unlimited access to draining people. She understands her relational value. She stops shrinking herself in conversations. She chooses who gets to be close to her. She becomes more selective with her energy. She no longer fears losing people by protecting herself. She recognizes that boundaries improve relationships. She becomes emotionally independent. She gains more control over her environment. 4. Self-worth gets rebuilt from scratch. Therapy helps women rebuild their self-worth from the inside, replacing insecurity, self-doubt, and negative narratives with a strong internal sense of value. She stops basing her worth on external validation. She recognizes her strengths without minimizing them. She learns to appreciate herself without conditions. She stops apologizing for existing. She begins celebrating her progress. She stops comparing herself to others. She becomes more confident in her abilities. She sees how powerful she truly is. She stops tolerating low-effort relationships. She becomes more assertive in her needs. She feels comfortable taking up space. She recognizes when she deserves better. She believes in her capacity to grow. She stops letting others define her identity. She becomes aware of her unique qualities. She learns to talk to herself with kindness. 5. Communication becomes a superpower. Therapy sharpens communication skills by helping women express their truths clearly, calmly, and confidently instead of through frustration or silence. She becomes better at articulating emotions. She expresses needs without shame. She stops fearing difficult conversations. She becomes more direct and honest. She learns how to listen actively. She begins understanding others more deeply. She avoids miscommunication that once caused conflict. She responds rather than reacts. She stays calm under stress. She stops shrinking her voice around strong personalities. She becomes more persuasive in her words. She develops healthier dialogue patterns. She speaks with intention. She becomes harder to manipulate. She expresses boundaries with clarity. 6. Mental clarity sharpens decision-making. Therapy gives women mental clarity that helps them make decisions based on logic, self-awareness, and emotional regulation instead of anxiety, guilt, or confusion. She stops overthinking every choice. She learns to trust her intuition again. She evaluates situations more objectively. She becomes more secure in her decisions. She stops relying on others to think for her. She weighs outcomes with more wisdom. She understands the motivations behind her choices. She avoids decisions made from fear. She sees consequences more clearly. She stops repeating old mistakes. She becomes more deliberate with her actions. She recognizes red flags sooner. She becomes less reactive and more strategic. She makes quicker, healthier choices. 7. Emotional regulation becomes easier. Therapy teaches women how to regulate their emotions in ways that help them stay stable, calm, and grounded even in stressful situations. She stops letting emotions rule her life. She becomes more aware of her emotional triggers. She learns coping techniques that keep her steady. She stops reacting impulsively. She becomes more patient with herself. She handles conflict with more maturity. She avoids emotional burnout. She stops getting overwhelmed by small things. She recognizes her emotional patterns more clearly. She becomes better at calming herself. She processes feelings instead of suppressing them. She becomes more balanced in relationships. She gains a sense of internal control. She refuses to be controlled by old emotional habits. She expresses emotions more healthily. She embraces vulnerability without chaos. 8. Identity becomes more authentic. Therapy helps women peel away expectations, conditioning, and societal pressure, allowing them to discover who they truly are without fear or performance. She stops living for approval. She recognizes parts of herself she once hid. She becomes more honest about her desires. She stops pretending to fit in. She discovers passions she ignored. She recognizes her deeper values. She becomes comfortable being different. She stops chasing identities created by others. She learns what she actually wants from life. She stops feeling ashamed of her true nature. She embraces her quirks and strengths. She becomes more expressive in her individuality. She stops playing roles to feel accepted. She becomes more self-directed. She honors her needs over others' expectations. She gains a stronger sense of direction. 9. Independence becomes natural. Therapy increases independence by helping women detach from emotional dependency, unhealthy attachments, and the need for external validation. She begins trusting her ability to handle life alone. She stops relying on unstable people for comfort. She becomes more self-sufficient. She recognizes her emotional autonomy. She stops staying in relationships out of fear. She starts prioritizing her own stability. She becomes more confident in solitude. She stops sacrificing herself to be accepted. She becomes more comfortable with detachment. She learns to enjoy her own company. She forms healthier connections. She becomes more empowered in decision-making. She stops settling for less than she deserves. She understands that independence is strength. 10. Power emerges from self-mastery. Ultimately, therapy unlocks a woman's real power by giving her mastery over her emotions, her past, her choices, and her identity, creating a version of her that is stronger than anything she has been before. She becomes calmer under pressure. She stops fearing emotional discomfort. She sees challenges as growth opportunities. She gains control of her inner world. She stops abandoning herself for others. She becomes deeply self-aware. She builds new beliefs that strengthen her. She becomes more decisive. She stands firmly in her worth. She lets go of limiting narratives. She creates healthier life patterns. She becomes more intentional in her actions. She recognizes her influence. She feels more capable in every area. And as you can see, therapy doesn't make a woman weaker, fragile, or dependent. It makes her sharper, wiser, calmer, and more in control of her entire life than she has ever been before. Because once she understands her patterns, heals her wounds, rebuilds her worth, and learns to protect her energy, she becomes a force no one can diminish. So if this message opened your eyes to how powerful emotional growth truly is, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now because more life-changing insights are coming your way. And remember, the strongest version of a woman is not the one who pretends she's fine, but the one who chooses to heal, rise, and transform into someone the world can no longer ignore.